Mr. Power, thanks for agreeing to an interview here. Ian Amoko is saying the reason he hasn't published your 62,000 word defence is because you never asked him to. I just want to pick up, doesn't natural justice dictate that both sides of a story need to be told? Should you have had to ask him? Shouldn't he have asked you?
I think that firstly, when you have a report prepared which is intended for use in discipline proceedings at a hearing, it's designed in a particular way. It's designed to present the evidence that people have to offer, and those witnesses would then be cross-examined, and you'd hear both sides of the argument over a series of days. One of the problems with all of these reports is that I have a full copy of the Wiltshire report. It fills 2 large packing cases. It would take you about a fortnight to read properly. My own report, my own statement, is 62,000 words. It would take you a day or 2 to read properly. You can't translate that into media soundbites.
So,
our position always was that firstly, if it's not going to go through discipline hearing, Glenmartin shouldn't have released the report at all. And if he was going to release it, he ought to release it alongside my own report. Now, he denies that was ever asked, and I'm sure that we're going to produce letters very soon, which will show that what he's saying there isn't quite true. That it was always made very clear, firstly, we oppose the release of the report, but secondly, if the Wiltshire report was going to be released, we wanted it released alongside the defence case. I think that's only fair. It's only fair that people should see both sides of the argument. What you're getting now is a cherry picking of one side of the argument, as if it is uncontested truth. Of course it isn't.
well, exactly. The point I'm trying to make here is his argument is the reason he's published it is because he wants as much information in the public domain, and obviously that can't be. I can't see how that squares up with not publishing your defence.
No, well, I think when he says he wants as much information as possible to reach the public domain, what he's actually saying is, what he actually means is, he wants as much information as possible that suits his side of the argument to reach the public domain. What he doesn't want is balance and fairness, and balance and fairness would mean that he complies with my long-standing written request to release my side of the argument as well. People can see both sides of the case. Let me be absolutely clear, nobody's claiming that the investigation, the abuse inquiry, was a perfect operation or mistakes weren't made. No operation is perfect, mistakes always are made. What we're saying is that nothing that went wrong was so gross or so mishandled that it justifies the very heavy-handed treatment that the Jersey government has given it. This is massive overkill of a problem that could have been dealt with in a very different sort of way. And it is, if you like, trying to make an example of somebody who is seen as threatening to government control of what goes on. The whole idea of independence in policing, a police force that can perhaps stick its nose into corners where it isn't invited, is something that a lot of Jersey interests are very hostile to. An old Islander once told me very early on that, look, you've got to understand what these people want is a police force that catches burglars, arrests drunks on a Saturday night, and otherwise minds its own business. Now, when the police force stopped minding its own business, it became a problem for certain interests. I think Senator Lamarchin represents those interests very well, and those interests are now trying, if you like, to put policing back in its box. And the way that they've treated me and the way they've treated others is an example of that behaviour.
Okay. Now, what I want to do, because we're saying about natural justice and as much information as possible to tell all sides of the story. Successive HMIC, Her Majesty's Inspectorate Constabulary reports concerning yourself and former Detective Chief Officer Lenny Harper, the APPO reports were all glowing and in complete contradiction to Wiltshire. Have you got a theory as to why the mainstream media never mentioned this? Why do you think Ian Lamoko didn't give states members or the public the ACPO reports and the rest of it. He's given Wiltshire that says one side of the story, doesn't give your defence, and doesn't give any of the ACPO reports, any of the HMIC reports. Have you got a theory as to why this is going on?
Well, I think if you accept the principle I explained earlier, that Senator Lamarckland has positioned himself as advocate for one side of the argument, I think any idea of balance or fairness has long since gone out the window. He, if you like, is the lawyer representing the establishment case on this, and so there could be no question of him introducing material which didn't suit his argument. He wouldn't see himself as the person who was going to do that. I think you're right, Neil, to draw attention to the HMI reports and the ACPO report. You should go back to the HMI reports, because the HMI reports, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, who are the recognised independent authority on quality of service in policing, were very positive about the way the force was being managed throughout the years when I was Chief Officer. But they did repeatedly express one particular concern. And the concern that they expressed was that there was far too much or too little distance between the force and political leadership. They felt that there ought to be an independent police authority. They didn't like the idea that a minister had single-handedly the accountability of the chief officer in his hands. And this is a recorded concern. Of course, it turned out to be a concern that had, in the end, a situation that had very serious consequences, because had there been a properly constituted police authority, I just don't believe that the sort of draconian action that was taken in November 2008, when I was suspended, would have occurred at all. That a properly constituted, balanced police authority would have considered all the best practice advice, taken all the various interests into account, and we would have had a quicker, cheaper solution to any concern than the very heavy-handed and expensive solution that, in fact, we had. Because bear in mind, by the time I was suspended, my retirement date had already been and gone, and I'm not sure that people noticed that, but it seemed to me that if people wanted a change in management, all they had to do was ask if I'd like to retire, and I would have probably said yes, but nobody did. They wanted, if you like, blood on the carpet instead. Well, I think they've had some blood on the carpet so far, but none of it's mine. And I think they've created the mess of this situation that they've now got themselves into. It's not only heavy-handed, it's not only injustice, but it's thoroughgoing incompetence that has led to a situation where 2.5 years down the line, we're still arguing over events that happened, a decision taken in the space of 20 minutes by Andrew Lewis when he was Home Affairs Minister. So that, I think, is where the HMI reports fit into the context of this. I mean, you've mentioned the ACPO reports, and for listeners that aren't completely familiar with that, what I did at the very beginning of the Historic Views Inquiry was ask the relevant UK authorities to appoint internationally recognised experts to come to Jersey to give advice, to quality control the investigation, to tell me if I should be doing anything. Was it going well? Was it going badly? What should I be doing to make sure it was perfect as possible? And also to sit down and brief ministers without me being there, and so they could give ministers an honest opinion as to how the matter was going. Now, in his statement, Andrew Lewis says that he was told by these international experts that the inquiry was, in his words, a shining example of how such an inquiry ought to be conducted. We have the written reports that were presented to me, and they give me a list of jobs to do. You can improve the investigation if you do matters 1 to 6. And then they come back 2 weeks later and say how pleased we are that the Chief has actioned all the recommendations that were made earlier. These experts were not appointed by me. They were selected by the competent UK authorities, and they gave a very positive picture of the investigation. Now, you've since had people who will call themselves experts, and I don't think if you look objectively at the qualifications of the Chief of Staff by Wiltshire and the qualifications of the people who work for the ACPO team or on the investigation, there'll be any comparison. You know, there is no comparison in the expertise. The UK authorities sent men and seriously senior detective experienced detectives, recognised at an international level. You know, you can Google these people and you find international recognition of their expertise. I think that you'd find it hard to find any international or even national recognition of the expertise of the people who came from Wiltshire. I mean, to me, if you actually try to read the Wiltshire report, in just reading that report, you learn quite a lot about the people who wrote the report. For example, they're not very good at writing reports. They seem sometimes to have a bit of a difficulty with the English language. Clarity is not frequently found. The message is muddled. You find yourself having to read some paragraphs over and over again to try and work out what they're actually attempting to say. And of course, what we haven't been provided with is the bundles of statements that are supposed to back up what is in the Wiltshire report. Now, I have those bundles of statements. And what you should be able to do is to look at the text of a report, then go and find the witness evidence in the statement which backs up what is in the text of a report. Sometimes you can do that, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes things appear in the report without being supported by evidence. Sometimes things appear in the report which seem to be contradicted by what is there in the evidence. I've got to say the use of the evidence is very selective. And it's not a quality piece of work. And in case anybody thinks, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Just look at the evidence that's out there. This is an investigation that cost nearly £1 million, over £1 million, that lasted nearly 2 years, and that failed to produce a discipline charge. Now, how many prizes do you win for that? This is just an example of an investigation that seemed to acquire a life of its own, and eventually finished by dumping a lot of reports on people's desks and the authors running away. It isn't a credible piece of work at all. And had it gone to a hearing, and I fully understand why Ian Markham wouldn't want to take it to a hearing. I wouldn't want the job of taking the Wiltshire report to a hearing and having competent people cross-examine this evidence, because it would fall apart in the cross-examination. So I understand why it was quietly put on a shelf and the whole thing forgotten about. Yeah. What isn't acceptable is that when I retired, it's brought out, the dust is blown off it, and somebody actually tries to give it credibility as if it was a serious document. It's not a serious document at all.